Hey everyone, it is your favorite CEO, Miss Flo, and welcome to another episode of Neon Mike where the conversations just glow. Today I have a very special guest. This is a person who I've been watching on social media for a while now. They have released a very special trailer that is really close to my heart. I really got excited. Oh my God, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Lambert, creator, founder of Wingless Comics and Wingless Entertainment. And the trailer she's referring to is our trailer for Air Force Ones, which is our latest IP, our latest property that is currently on Kickstarter right now. And it's basically a story of three Academy cadets who end up finding legendary mad gear and use those mad gear, use those mechs in order to free their oppressed society. So it's everything that you love in a Gundam, Macross, Robotech, Mecha type series, just with our distinct flavor as part of it, as an intrinsic part of the storytelling and the mechanics. And we were able to put together a pretty awesome animated trailer that infused all of that. Obviously, with the name being Air Force Ones, we had to go with Nelly. We had to have shoes very prevalent. There are things that are intrinsic to our culture that I wanted to make sure that out the gate we showcased. And so that's what we did.
And when I first saw it, it was like I got chills. Honestly, it was just like so epic, and I'm just like, I'm honestly, it's kind of ironic that I lost for words, but I have you on my podcast, so I can't lose my words. It's just, we've been advocating for so long to have representation in all sorts of mediums. So to actually see this like coming true is just, oh my God, congratulations for one. Because I know the
Thank you.
work that you put in for this project. Like, how long have you been working on this?
This particular one actually came together in this incarnation, is what I should say. It came together pretty quickly in maybe like 6 months. But that's because I've been doing comic publishing and Kickstarters and these things for about 4 years now. So I knew what was necessary to get this particular project off the ground once I had the idea and once it was very solid. But I've wanted to do a mech series or a Robotech style series for years now, 10, 11, 12, since I was a kid, right? Since I've always envisioned those kind of big battles. And I think that a lot of times as creators and as Black creators, we want to see certain things. The thing that I try to make different about this and about every project I do is not just switching out what we already know and putting Black characters just in there. I don't necessarily like the phrase like, oh, my characters are characters, they just happen to be Black. Because I'm not able to live like that, right? I'm not just a
Right.
person who happens to be Black. I am a Black person, and that's that. There no qualifiers, no nothing else, right? That should be enough for everybody to understand. And I wanted to do that same thing. Black American culture is very, it gets eaten, it gets taken pieces of, right, in order to become popular culture for a lot of different places, which has been the nature of our culture since it's been around. I wanted to do my best to kind of take hold of that itself and say, no, I'm doing something that's intrinsically tied to my culture and who I am as a person and who my friends are as people. And also something that we all like in terms of anime, in terms of big robot battles, in terms of seeing all these things. I wanted to make sure that that was at the forefront of things. And I knew that the timing was right. I knew that it's time to strike while the iron's hot. Because as you said, we do ask for these forms of representation, and we do want these forms of representation. And I wanted to give one that I felt was more true to us and to who we are than the veneer of that. I've seen recent projects in terms of animated properties and different things where maybe the intention was good, and somewhere along the way, I don't know if it's producers or the studio or whatever else, it just kind of gets taken away, right? Like all the intrinsic parts that make us get taken away, and we're kind of no more than a mascot for whatever the project is. And I wanted to make sure that I did something that was different than that and held a little bit more power than that. And that's why, as we talk about the trailer, even that for me, the trailer looks like it could be normal. You don't know what it's about until the last 5 seconds, where you get the pan up after they've gone into the room, and you get a pan up and you're like, oh shit, now it's about robots, right? Like now it's about Gundam, now it's about these things. And so that was important too. I love that wow factor. And when the animator sent it back to me, I got that wow factor, right? Like even I felt like, oh man, that feels epic. It feels large.
On your Kickstarter, as you are pitching this to the public, you said it's Gundam meets a different world. And that made me smile because that's one of my comfort shows. You know what I mean? Like growing up.
Same.
And I'm just interested in terms of like how that intersects. Like, what do we expect to see in this series? If you can give like a brief synopsis.
Yeah, yeah. Without any spoilers again, that is the perfect marriage of what the show is to me because like you said it's a comfort show for you. So Dwayne Wayne was this guy, right? And he's a geek, he's kind of a nerd in the first season. And by the last season, he's suave, he's married, he's accomplished, he's a businessman. So you get all this character development from him. And you get all these social interactions again from people who have never kind of interacted, right? All these different forms of Black culture. You get Whitley, you get Freddie, you know what I mean? Like on Ron, you have everybody who intersects, and they've all got different experiences. But what brings them together? One is Hillman College. You know, two again is the Black experience. Three is learning and growing. Like so, that is the foundation for Air Force Ones. While Air Force Ones is obviously fun and it's anime, what I believe in anime and manga that's different than American comics is that manga takes itself very seriously. Not all the time, but like certain manga take themselves very seriously. And they tell stories that are very serious, even while they're doing fantastical things in terms of magic or powers, or again, giant robots, whatever. They're talking about social issues, they're talking about economics, they're talking about all these things. And I think that that's slightly different. It doesn't happen the same way in American cartoons, for sure, and very rarely in American comics. So Air Force Ones, while it's an American product, because obviously I'm Black American, it takes a lot of anime and manga sensibilities in order to tell its story. Again, at the heart of the story, it's about three kids who stumble upon something that's able to help them gain freedom. So that begs the question, what do they need freedom from? Right? What is the dividing factor? What is the enemy and how is the enemy? And I want to, and I am exploring all of those things within the narrative of what makes a villain, and not in the way where you know a guy is a villain, right? Like he's killed 100 people, and then you're like, well, maybe he's a nice guy. No, no, no. What starts this path, right? What is the difference between a rebel and a freedom fighter and a terrorist, right? It's all propaganda. It's all how you look at these things. And that's some of what we explore in Air Force One, right? While also having that very home, very comforting shared experience among the people, right? And also building those characters from being the brash young or the nerdy young, the inexperienced to what they're going to be veteran pilots of a war. And it's going to take toll on them and it's going to take toll on the world. And I think that's another thing that's very important. I don't know that we have many theories in our culture outside of, you get stuff like Power, or you get like the big shows, right, that about drugs or about gangs. We very rarely get like character studies where you see where it's not just about the war we had, right? It's not just about this thing, it's about the effects of that war on the people who fought it, and how they change and how they grow and how their ideas change.
I'm glad you talked about that because I know some people that, are in the military, um, and it's something that needs to be a deeper conversation,
Mhm.
because we're sending people out to like nightmares essentially, but they don't always get the help that they deserve. And just like putting it in a show is in itself will be so comforting because it's like I'm not alone in this. How do I deal with this? And I hate when people say that they don't like politics in their cartoons and series, but I'm just like, if you knew the true essence of X-Men, that's that's what it is. It's just there's so many parallels and people don't understand like when you see something that represents your story, there is a comfort to it because it shows like I'm not the only one that's going through this. So thank you for just being considerate for, just putting it in these stories. Like thank you for that.
Thank you. I think it's very important, and I think that you hit on something also very important, right? When people say that they don't want politics in their stories, what they're saying is they don't want stories, right? They want something that speaks to them into what they could potentially be, unburdened by like reality. And that is completely different than saying fantasy. Like I know what a fantasy is, right?
Mm.
But that's different than what we're talking about. When people don't want politics and things, that's a very entitled place to come from, because what people call politics, other people call real life,
Mm.
right? There are wars that people, myself included, right, are not really wanting to talk about now happening in the Middle East because there are so many political things that go along with it, right? Like, and so maybe you say something, maybe you don't. That doesn't mean it's any less politics. That doesn't mean one side isn't doing something horrific just because we've called them the good guys for however long. That doesn't mean they're not doing bad things, right? We to compare it to fantasy and sci-fi, in Star Wars, the Empire was the legal government. They were the legal, lawful government, right? And they were atrocious. And we're able to be like, oh man, everybody should fight against the Empire because they're evil, because we can see that, because it's named. But if you're in that universe, right, you're putting yourself in that universe, in that empire. They are the legal government. They're not doing anything outside of what we've seen legal governments do in current times. There is a lot that goes into it. I also think when we talk about PTSD, like you said, a lot of people, we send them to war, we send them to nightmares, we send them to horrors, then they don't get the help when they come back. I also think that's something that's neglected in our community, and not necessarily due to ourselves, but just due to the nature of the country and our historical presence and on and on and on, is that PTSD happens in the hood, right? Like we don't talk about it. I grew up in California. I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in Long Beach, LA, all over, right? In Southern California. And so you see things. I am not saying that I am that dude that I saw this stuff and on and on and on. I know people who know people, right? Like I've had friends from when I was 15, probably on, even, I don't even know if 15, 12, 13, 14. Cats were dying, right? They were at school one day, they weren't at school the next day. I know cats that got caught up, you know what I mean? On and on and on. So the people who are there witnessing these things, that is no different. They don't feel any less PTSD when going through this than a person that went to war. People talk about Chicago and they'll call it Chirac and on and on and on. So what does that mean? What's the connotation there? That there is PTSD, that there's things that we need to deal with to heal ourselves, right? To heal each other. And that is one of those things in the PTSD and some of these other depression and on, some of these other conversations that doesn't come up. Like these are not, I'm not saying that they're not great places to live. What I am saying is they are not without their horrific tragedies, just like everywhere else, and they need to be given that same amount of care and empathy. And that is not always the case.
That's so true. I feel like gun violence in America is just astronomical, but we as a society have grown numb to it.
Hmm.
I think there was like there was a shooting at the who won the Super Bowl? It was the Chiefs.
Hmm.
And there was like a shooting at their
At that parade,
celebration. And
yeah.
then it was just like they talk about it one day and then it's no longer news
Hmm.
anymore.
Right,
You just like
right.
bypass it. To everybody else outside of the United States, they're looking at us like it's crazy.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure that like there's people, foreign countries that look at the US the same way the US probably looks at the Middle East and
Hmm.
probably don't want to go there. Um, but you know, using your platform in your series to help address those certain things could, in a sense, it's something that is fictional, could actually make a change or a difference in the real world. And that's really powerful.
I think that sometimes we neglect how far our words can go when we choose them correctly. I think it's important if you look at a lot of the what's called historically like literature, like the great stuff, right? Even Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet is like a story of love, but it's also a story of tragedy, right? It's a tragedy on purpose because it's like that was foolish of both of them and their houses and on this whole thing. If you're looking at Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien was talking about the horrors of war throughout the entire thing. Yeah, it's elves and orcs and all this stuff, but he's talking about how bad it was and even the Industrial Revolution. You can go through history and see that's the case. Where people are talking about mental illness, where they're talking about other things. 1984, like we're seeing a lot of this come alive as we are ourselves living. And I think it's important. And I also think that I wrestle with this a lot. just in normal everyday life, I wrestle with how much to say. Do I go and defend this point? If somebody's talking bad about X-Men 97 because now all of a sudden they've said Morph is non-binary and somebody's going off on it, right? There are people, my people, and I see it a lot in the male black community more than I see the inverse. Now that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just what I see. We are far too comfortable oppressing people as long as it's not us. We're far
Mm,
too comfortable using the language of the oppressor, of things that were said about us 50 years ago, 20 years ago, about this new group that, well, I don't mind black people being there. Just don't show them on TV. I don't mind non-binary people being there. Just don't show them on my cartoon. I struggle with that, right? Because do you fight every fight? Do you go into every comment section? Do you go crazy? But I also struggle with not saying anything.
yeah.
I have friends, I have family that I genuinely love. I have empathy for people who I don't even know, and I grew up in a time where, again, things have changed. I'm 42, right? So I grew up in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s where certain things that we used to say would fly, and now they 100% don't, and they shouldn't. And if we had been more knowledgeable younger, we wouldn't have done that. I would hope. But I think that all those things again are important to talk about, right? To stand out in front and to be able to say like, oh, as a kid, I thought one thing. As
Mhm.
an adult, I think another thing, and I think it's okay to champion those things. Like we should not be asking for diversity and inclusion and a voice and a platform. And then also when other people want one, we're like, nah, no, the platform stops right here. It's a ridiculous thought, but it happens all the time. And so I think that it's important to do that. I think it's important to talk about the horrors of war. I think it's important to talk about economics. Everybody thinks, well, not everybody, but everybody thinks that they're a month away from being Donald Trump. And you know what I mean? And like, one, I wouldn't want to be anyway, but two, like it's dumb, right? But people, because that's like that American dream thing. So I think that it's very important to use our voice in ways that matter, right? Not just yelling or screaming at the moon or whatever, right? In ways that matter. If I can reach even the next generation to say, and they're like, man, the wartime stuff, the economic stuff, the socio-political whatever that I put in the stories, or they just understand the message. I think that that's far more important than going out and kind of tap dancing so that I can be famous or people can shout me out. I don't care. Right. If I want to be famous or get shouted out, I can do a bunch of silly videos, and take over TikTok. But if I'm writing, if I'm trying to create something that will last for a while, if I'm trying to create something that will impact people, I want my impact to ultimately be a good one and one that's beneficial and edifying for not only myself, but people who come behind me.
And I think that that's a noble cause. I don't think people realize like how influential a lot of the shows that I watched as a childhood was like so impactful to me. The lessons that we've learned with the different world, it's encouraged like so many people to go to college. You know what I mean?
Seriously.
Um, and uh, what's another great show? Like we learned our morals from Power Rangers. You know, what I mean, we got
Right.
to see, a variety, a diverse group of superheroes through that franchise. And so like I understand the importance and the connections that these type of series make with our young folk. This is why I'm so excited to see Air Force Ones. Now, in terms of the status of production, where are we at? Because I know you had the Kickstarter. Were
Mhm.
you able to meet your goal?
So we met our goal and we are $1,000 or $1,100 over our goal. We still have 6 more days to go. So we still got some more time to grow. In terms of production, we've got kind of 3 or 4 legs of production. As soon as the Kickstarter finishes, which we've already really started, we're prototyping the figures. As you can see, I got one behind me there. And I did a little unboxing of one of the mechs on my TikTok. And so you can see that we're getting the prototypes in because we have the action figures, right? So that's really important. And prototyping takes a long time. It takes months to get everything right, to make sure the bin's correctly, it's the right kind of plastic, and all these little technical things that it's not really fun, but super important to make sure that we're bringing out the quality that we should. Um, Also, the manga itself is already in production. On the Kickstarter, there are already 10 preview pages because we are already deep into the production of the book before we started the Kickstarter. And so it'll take again a couple months because it's going to be over 70 pages. That takes a long time just to draw and to get colored and make sure everything is right. So we're already into production on that. The shoes are already produced, the shirts, all the merch stuff is kind of produced and already good to go. So we can order those as soon as the Kickstarter is over and kind of get those set up for people because we're going to obviously give them special boxes. We want to create that exclusivity, right? When you support Air Force Ones, you're part of like the Wingless tribe. Like you're one of us. You're in there. I hate when people say like, "Oh, you're part of the family," only because every business that I've ever been to that's like you're part of the family. That means they're going to treat you like junk in like 2 or 3 2 or 3 minutes, right? So I never say part of the family. But they're on the inside. The last part of it, which obviously takes far more funding than anything else, is the animation. So we're gonna have to get the animation out in smaller parts because we have to fund that, right? And part of funding that is through Kickstarter, is through having the books out, is through sales, is through merch and all of that other stuff. So we have the teaser now. I plan on putting out another teaser probably by the end of the year. Again, sales willing and all of that stuff as we continue to grow. We also have a partnership with Blerd Station, excuse me, Blerd Station and 9B Collective, where we're currently developing the anime. And again, if you know anything about development in terms of like Hollywood, it is a lengthy process. The best thing takes a long time to do. And then animation takes years. So we Blerd Station just had an epic signing with Michael Jai White signing on to produce and to star in an upcoming Blerd Station show. That's not Air Force One's. He's just signing on to do a show. So that's a big signing, and that ups the uh
The
the
ante.
clout
Yeah.
for better word. Yeah, right. The ante for Blerd Station in terms of what they're doing for the market and what we plan on doing with them in the market. 9B Collective is the studio, Aldous Hodge, Philip Butte Jr., and Michael Ulawande, and they just got off doing production for the Super Bowl, costume design for the Super Bowl. They did the design for Blue Beetle. Again, they're in every facet of Hollywood. So again, we're working with them as well to kind of get the production going and get the back end going so that we can actually bring something that has quality and quantitative value to Blerd Station, to the Black community, to social media, to Hollywood, to everybody in general.
Right. And if those that are watching, if you could subscribe to Blerd Station, you could be part of this. This is history, to be honest. Like you're really making history if you invest now, and you would have a piece of the pie. You would have some form of ownership in this franchise. I've already subscribed. I hope that anybody else that watch it, I encourage you to subscribe, because this is how we get the representation that we've been crying for out there. You know what I mean? I've had conversations with various people in Blerd Station, and they told me the hardships of Hollywood, where they would either have to compromise their art, or the door basically closed because the executives feel like it won't appeal to the white audience, or they won't be able to connect to it because the majority of Black characters. And it was just like, it just made me upset, because we talked about earlier in terms of empathy and be able to connect to whomever. It doesn't matter uh their ethnicity or their race. It's just like, this is somebody's story, and then you should be able to connect with it. If I can connect to Guardians of the Galaxy, if that's able to make me cry almost like at the end of every movie, then you should be able to connect and resonate with whatever happens in Black stories.
Exactly. So it's weird being like othered in real time, right? Because whatever white fantasy story, etc., is told is taken as the standard. I understand that we live in America, and again, the historical context behind that. It's weird to again in 2024 be othered to your face, and so that's something that I'm very combative about, for lack of better words, right? There was a conversation that I was having, and it's been a conversation on the internet recently about black coded characters, cartoon characters, black people being like animals in different various cartoon adaptations, and all of those things. And how black people shouldn't accept that and we shouldn't do and blah 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 blah. One, I'm going to say I think people should be able to have fun. If black people want to say Sonic is honorarily black or he's black, who cares? The dude's a blue hedgehog. Like, let's say he's black. It's fun. Like, let it go, right? It's not definitive and it's not going to change anything about the character or about the series or about you loving it, right? Unless you think that black people are less than, right?
Mm.
Then it's a problem. The other, end of that is that when other people do it, it's not looked at the same way. Historically, again, if we're talking about anime, white culture has said like every anime character is them. Like Rikaru becomes Rick Hunter. You know what I mean? Like these are the things that happen when they port it over and they're like, oh, he's white. And it's like, well, they were never white. They were always, these Asian characters. Or you
Right.
get somebody like the Elric brothers in, Full Metal Alchemist that are literally like in a Nazi regime still. And they're like, oh, they're not bad. Bro, the dude's name is the Fuhrer. Bro, like, come on now. But again, but if black people come in and say, like, oh man, Colonel Mustang, he black. And then people are gonna we know he's not actually black. But
Right.
that's a thing that we've historically done, right? We invite people into our culture. Look at your MGKs, look at your Eminems, look at all these people, look at your Miley Cyruses, right? We invite them into our culture because we're like, oh, we love people, right? We love sharing. But then it gets turned into something else, or it's a problem when we do it as opposed to when they do it. And I think that those are the hard conversations that need to be had. And I do think that there need to be people, for example, right? I'm not saying I'm great, but like, for example, like myself, trying to stand in that gap, right? And create things that, again, are intrinsically Black, but go across all borders and go across everything so that CEOs, heads of studios can't say, well, look, the color purple, the musical bombed. People don't want to see Black people. We can go, no, this thing, that other thing that we did that was just great and
Mhm.
intrinsically Black, people loved and it made a ton of money. Like we don't want to see the color purple anymore necessarily as a
Mhm.
musical.
Right.
And I think it's important that people like myself, people like yourself, things like Blerd Station, all these things stand in the gap to show the viability and the necessity for what we do and how we create.
And that's very true. And I think people don't understand is like looking at black trauma films is very exhausting. I watch plenty of black documentaries and they make me cry every time. And it's just we just want to see as much as diversity in the media is the type of media, type of genre as
Yeah.
well. I want to see
Mhm.
more of us in horror films and actually survive. I liked
Right.
Nope. I enjoy Nope and
Yeah.
Us and then
Right. Right.
you know what I mean? Like, I want to see more of us in sci-fi. Why can't we be wizards? We say black girl magic all the time. Let me see a black magical,
Right.
person.
Well, we do have the secret society of yeah, I feel that way too.
It felt like it had a point, and it I saw the trailer for it, and y'all was so close. I was like, y'all was like really, really close. And then y'all literally turned into the literal magical Negro. I
Yeah. It was supposed to be a trope and a trope based on a trope and like super meta commentary. I have a couple issues with it. And again, I haven't seen it. I mean, beyond the trailer, I won't go see it, beyond the trailer, on and on and on. But there are a few troubling things within that. And I know that there's someone there that wanted to make a story, and I did some research on the director in terms of I wanted to know who he was. So I understand the duality of what he was dealing with. And he said it's a very like mixed race story because he's telling his story from his perspective. But I feel like there are a lot of things that lend themselves to Black culture and take from Black culture and don't necessarily respect that culture in the way that it should
mhm.
based on what they're doing. I do think that it's important for people to have an awakening, right? In everybody, put away what you were as a child, right? Like the thoughts that you had as a child and grow up and reevaluate those thoughts and find out if they're right. I think that's very important. And I think that that has a ton of value. Um, I think that value gets lessened when you add it to something that's as hot button an issue for us as the magical Negro trope. I also have I have a problem when the reason for your awakening, even though you've been this person for X amount of time and done these things for X amount of time, is an interracial love interest, right? I don't have any problem with interracial love. I have a problem with the context of it based on the story you're telling. If you're
Mhm.
talking about a magical Negro and that's supposed to be that's the problem. Like the story should have been like the problem with the magical Negro, right? But like that's what it is. And then you're subverting that by saying that true love is what breaks you out of that. I think that's kind of whack because it's true. Like you got to battle, right? Like we've fought for these things to get away from those tropes, to get away from being that, to get away from the mammy thing, to get away from all these other things. But then when you've crossed that point, and now you're saying that that's the case, and love is the thing that brought you out. Um, you are transferring that love to because love is greater than all, right? You're transferring it to someone who does not reflect what you are and what you're speaking of, and that to me is problematic. Um, maybe not as a second, third, fourth, fifth time that we visited this trope in this meta commentary, but certainly as the first time we visited this meta commentary, because I think it flies in the face of Black love, and I even mean Black self love, right? Like the love of oneself for all of those characters in there isn't enough for them to do anything different. But your love and putting something and someone else on a pedestal is what does it for you. I don't know that I like the connotation of that.
Mm, that's a very true point. I think the frustration with movies like The Magical Negro is I just can't express like my disappointment enough. Only because it's like I do want to see us more in magic. Like I grew up watching Charm. I grew up watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I saw the reboot that they did on Netflix, and I'm like, there was some black characters that kind of stole the show. So I'm like, if you see how like you have the blueprint, it's there. But it's just like it gets skimmed over. Like I would love to see the black characters from Sabrina the Teenage Witch to like have a spinoff, honestly, because I think they really could carry a show, but it's kind of like skimmed over, and now like the whole magical Negro thing is a joke and with a joke, but nobody is really laughing. So it just kind of with your partnership with Blerd Station, it just shows us like we can't always rely on these old institutions because it doesn't seem they're really going to get it. So we have to really build our own lane. We have to be the Tyler Perry and the Robert Townsends of sci-fi and blurred culture because that's the only way this is going to get done, honestly.
Hollywood itself, and this is someone who's again trying to break into Hollywood, like loves Hollywood, have loved movies his entire life, et cetera, et cetera, is like is a set of diminishing returns. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, and that's not just for Black people, right? Like that means there are a lot of times where they just don't know. I don't want to say Hollywood doesn't know how to write because there are a lot of really talented people there. The people who are overseeing these productions sometimes, the people who are saying what goes and what ultimately doesn't go, they are out of touch. They are out of tune. There have been obviously numerous female characters and female parts where they don't speak like women speak, and it's obvious to women, and women are sitting there like what? But it was some guy who was in there was like, oh, I think that would be super cool if she said it. I bring it up all the time. I at least get to say it once a year, so I love when I get to say this. There's always a time in a movie with Black people in it uh, where somebody does something and the character's like, step off. And like Black people haven't said step off since like 1989, right? Like I went through the step off years, I know, right? Like we don't do that. But somebody in the studio thought that that was the thing that somebody was going to say. So when we have things like magical Negroes, when we have things where it's these power fantasies, we are not necessarily written as humans. And that is something that we need to change, right? Again, I'm never going to, I don't want it to be the thing where we're saying, oh, my character is human, they just happen to be Black. No, Black people are intrinsically humans. We are whole, three-dimensional people, just by nature. And again, that's part of othering us, right? The black person can be strong, just not as strong as the white dude, right? He's got, and there are mentor roles, and they've been going on as long as time has been going on, and I think that those have value. But when you have characters that their only job in life is to make it easier for their counterparts, that's whack. In general, that's not good storytelling. That's not good character. And so we can have, look, Legolas is magical, right? But he's not a magical trope necessarily. The dude is dope. He got a bow and arrow. He's taking down the biggest things. He's doing a bunch of stuff and da 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 da. He's not the main guy because he's not the son of the king,
Right.
right? He's the son of the elf king. He's not the son of the human king. That don't make him any less than. That doesn't make him any less dope. Same thing with Gimli. Same thing with some of these, again, well-worn characters. When it comes to us, sometimes people just feel the need on, I guess, maybe a social level to lessen what we do and lessen our impact. And I think that there, in general, there is a fear of what's different. If women are stronger than men in movies, then maybe they'll be stronger in general. Who cares? Big deal. I mean, it doesn't affect me. I don't see a problem with it because I'm not scared that women are going to do the same thing that historically men have done, right? Like those are all things that go into the psyche of writing these things and doing these things. And I think that with something like Blerd Station, right? We've seen this formula happen before, but we've seen it on different stages. We've seen it on Fox 11. We've seen it on the CW. We've seen it on UPN. Black people love entertainment, right? We love media. We love seeing ourselves on screen. What's happened historically, though, is once they've made the money with those things, then they've transitioned to a different audience, right? To legitimize themselves. With Blerd Station, and what I love about Blerd Station is the ethos behind it is creating media that we love, right? Because that's always going to happen in general, creating media that we love, but then not selling us down the river for it, not selling us out for it. Being able to keep that ownership and continue to tell great stories and continue to do great things. You brought up Robert Townsend. I love Robert Townsend. I've been following Robert Townsend since I was a kid, since before the Parenthood. You know, Hollywood Shuffle has the best opening scene to me in the history of movies. I just love it the way it's done. And I think that when we have voices like that talking, I think it's important. I've watched Meteor Man more times than I can count. I think that there are a lot of things that we can build on, as long as we continue to build, right? A lot of times, one will make it. It's like what I call the Obama theory. There were so many people after President Obama was president. They were like, well, you got your president, so everything is equal. It's not. That's
Mhm.
one little peg on this humongous board of pegs, right? Like, so as long as we continue to tell stories undeterred, unbowed, and just tell, I hate when people separate the two. Well, you don't have to be black, just tell a good story. I'm black and I tell a good story. And I'm going
Right.
to continue to do that. And there are a ton of us out there in the industry doing the same thing. We just have to continue to do that, because there's always going to be someone trying to say it's not good enough. There are people, again, there are people who are out now that say anime as a genre isn't a genre. It's not good enough. Bro, it's taken over the world, right? Like it's taken over everything. There are people who don't like Disneyland. It's the biggest theme park in the world. You know, someone's always not going to like whatever the thing is.
Right.
We just have to be undeterred in our message, and our fervor for telling it, right? We are so comfortable sharing our culture with other people, and again, letting other people into our culture, and all. Look, Travis, we just got the thing. Travis Kelsey invented the fade, right? Like, no, he didn't, obviously,
Mhm.
right?
I
But
was
people are going to
so
say that.
upset. Like, are
It
y'all
don't
for
even make
real?
sense. Like,
It's like y'all never seen the Fae before. Y'all was using it like forever in the 90s. Every black character I saw had
right,
the same fade.
right, right,
Like for
right, right. But now magically, yeah, exactly. So I think that there is a way to retain ownership of what's ours and make our stamp on things while also having a cultural exchange, right? We one have to admit that like our culture gets exchanged. Black American culture gets exchanged. Throughout the Black diaspora, culture gets exchanged as well. I'm speaking to what is my perspective. I don't want anybody to feel like they're being left out in my commentary. I'm speaking from what I know. And that's a Black American perspective, an intrinsic one. And so our culture gets shared across the globe. TikTok wouldn't be what it is without us, period. So if that's the case, there is a way to continue to tell our stories and to continue to do what we do, while also retaining ownership of it and ownership of the cultural idea of it. And I think that's important. And I think that's a huge component to continuing to tell our stories in a way that we love and in a way that we are able to enjoy them.
Right, and it's more authentic that way. When you have Black writers, when you have women in the room, when you have like just a little diverse group of people in a space, things feel very authentic. Nope felt authentic because there were certain things in the Black culture that we do that we saw. That's where it's like,
Mhm,
you know what I
mhm.
mean? Like we
Yeah.
want that in cinema. But it's like
Mhm,
for some reason these Hollywood execs just don't get it. And then like you saw the success of Nope, you saw the success of Black Panther and
mhm,
all this, but it's still they still have this doubt for some reason. And I'm like, it's to me, it feels like it's no longer like it's about the numbers.
mhm,
It's about being these gatekeepers to the tools to tell these stories.
mhm.
You know what I mean? So that's what it's looking like to me. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I agree. I feel like it's always been that way, right? And but that's again why you get something like The Color Purple, the musical, compared to a Black Panther, right? This movie did good, but this one didn't. So the audience is fickle. No, that movie would have done what that movie did regardless. One, musicals historically don't fare well in movie theaters. You've got a couple standouts, Hamilton, Moulin Rouge, et cetera, a couple different things. But like look at Into the Woods. Into the Woods was a Broadway musical for X amount of years, and that bombed, right? Like it bombed too. So again, there are all these things that go into it, and I think that it becomes convenient for people to talk about Black people as a monolith in terms of, see, they didn't like this, so we can do something else, or we can take this away from them, not taking into account the demographics like we would anything else, right? We would take into the graphics, sorry, take into account the demographics of 18 to 34, 34 to 42, etc., and all these other little metrics. And it's easy to take that away. Same thing with the Marvels, right? You can go and say, "Oh, well, the Marvels bombed because nobody liked it. Nobody wanted to see a story about women." Well, one, they didn't get to do a press tour. Two, they were in the middle of a strike. Three, people aren't going to the movie theaters like they used to anyway. Four, you know what I mean? Like on and on and on. There are all these things that go into it. People try to take out those little pieces in order to fit the narrative that they want. Just say you didn't want it in the first place, and then we can all skip all of that.
Mhm.
And so I do believe that with the proliferation of the internet, camera equipment, like I don't remember, was it Zack Snyder or was it Nolan? No, Nolan. Christopher Nolan shot like a whole 5 minute little mini film on iPhone. We can do more, and there are more avenues open to people. So I do think that Hollywood in general, or media in general, wants to kind of shut that down and does want to gatekeep that, but it's impossible. They can't stop me from writing. They can't stop you from writing. They can't stop from your fans from seeing it and telling the people about it. So I think that there is a concerted effort to remain status quo, and I mean that across the board. I mean in terms of like how people quote unquote view Black people, how people view women, how people view any marginalized community. There's a group that wants to keep the status quo, but it's impossible. So we're in that part of the struggle. We're in that part of the battle where what is old and what has been is dying away and is being taken away and losing that power structure. And so it's going to be a fight for some of it, but I think it's a worthy fight. I think again, it's kind of crazy that in 2024 we are still in certain forms asking to be seen as just human. That
Mhm.
is wild that anybody should have to do that. But that don't mean I'm gonna stop. That don't mean that you should stop. That doesn't mean that, again, that don't mean that I'm not gonna launch Air Force Ones and be ready for whoever tries to test my knowledge of the genre or the technique in which I wrote or my credentials, any of those things. Okay, if we want that, then we've got to be bold enough and strong enough to stand, just to stand and to be there and to fight.
And you're right, and it's something it sucks that we still have to fight for it in 2024, but it's just like there's no other way around that. I really enjoy looking at your Instagram page because not only are you doing, Air Force Ones, you have other projects that you have been a part of. Like, you're not new to the game. Like, you have Justice, Her, Nightfall, and a plethora of others here. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, Wingless Comics started about 4 years ago, and we've been very fortunate and blessed to be able to do what we want to do and to tell the stories that we want to tell. We started with we debuted at a convention called Black Comics Day in San Diego in 2019. So this year, when we come around this year, it'll be our 5 year anniversary going into 2025. And we started. I started right, and I had just a poster, a couple posters, a little 12-page book, and from there, it's been an avalanche of support, of love, of shares, of comics and everything. So Justice is our flagship character. He's our main character. Excuse me. He's a descended angel who comes down and very quickly learns that the line between good and evil isn't black and white like he thought. So it's very like Frank Miller, dark noir, kind of you're in the mind of the character and what he's thinking as things go on. It's also very Spawn-esque in that we use like a Christian mythology as the base for these things, but not as a form of teaching or trying to convert or any of that stuff, right? We're using it not unlike we use Norse mythology in Marvel Comics or anything else, or Greek mythology in DC. Her is written by Malachi Bailey, and he was the first writer to join up with Wingless Comics with me. And Her is a long-lived immortal, and so every time she dies, she comes back with a different set of powers and a new kind of persona. And in this incarnation, she's a water elemental, and so she's got to find out why. Kind of, she's in this cycle of death and life, and who's hunting her, and kind of why. So it's this journey of discovery. uh, Nightfall was a 5 part crossover that we did with 2 other companies, Constant Hustle Comics and Concept Moon Studios. And it was like our big battle, Avengers kind of, hey, meet the characters, story where our heroes come together and they are trying to destroy an ancient evil. So it's all fun stuff, right? All those comics are under what we call the Wingless Comics gold label, which is our we're branding that going into the new year. The gold label stuff is all of our American style comics and the legacy characters that are all in one interconnected universe. And the black label stuff is some of the stuff that we're venturing out into now, to include Air Force Ones and a couple other projects that'll be hitting probably before the end of this year or going into next year. So we're able again to diversify a lot of great storytelling, a lot of fun, a lot of things that we've always wanted to do. And the only really thing stopping us was fear, right? That's the only, oh man, is anybody gonna like it? You know, you got to put it out there. So we've been fortunate to be very successful on both Kickstarter and in-person sales. Um, we continue to grow. Scarlet Knight is one of our new titles from my boy Jay Allen, and we're gonna get him on and going. We signed a partnership deal with Constant Hustle Comics to bring Avery the Astonishing, their flagship character, under a joint publishing deal with us. So we've added that to our stable as well. We also have Immortalis, which kind of tells the history of the Wingless universe, and it sets the stage for like the world that you see now. And it's historical fiction written by Brett Hillisham. And so again, we are well rounded in what we do. We try to remain grounded and tell a plethora of different stories um, that create one large story, just like my story and your story. When we link up, it creates another new story, right, of the world. And so we want to reflect that, and we try to reflect that in what we do at Wingless Comics. And again, we've been successful almost, yeah, 20 times on Kickstarter. All of our campaigns have been successful. We do have one on there that says my original Justice #1. It says canceled. That's because I pushed the launch button too early. I was the first time I was on Kickstarter. I didn't know what I was doing. So I launched the campaign like a month and a half early, and I was like, wait, I'm not ready. Cancel. So with the good comes the bad, right? With the triumphs come the mistakes, and all of it is like a learning process. And we learn and we grow with our fans and our supporters and people who always show up for us. And we always do the highest quality storytelling, art, merchandise that we can. We're always industry quality, and that's no different with again with Air Force Ones or even something like this. I come on here and I will, and I feel the same esteem that I would if I was on Good Morning America or, you know what I mean, Kelly Ripa or whatever, right? Like these things are important. Your platform is just as important as anything I'm doing with Air Force Ones because your platform gives a voice and you have a voice that is championing and speaking to things that are important. And without that, just as well as everything else, we wouldn't be making any strides forward, right? Without having our own outlets to tell our stories, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So I thank you for providing this kind of space where we can come on and we can talk candidly and even empathetically about what we're doing and how we are trying to move as a non-monolithic body of people that share so much commonality.
Oh, thank you so much. No, it's just been a pleasure to speak with you, and just to connect with you. Like I said, as soon as I saw the trailer for Air Force Ones, I was sold, and I'm crossing my fingers for you because like I really want to see this and just to hear your process in terms of like what it took to for you to get to this point. It's like I really want you to succeed because I think about how the series can impact and influence so many young people. I just really want this to happen. So thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate it for you hopping on this Zoom twice because we started. But my last question is like for the shoes,
Mhm.
will they be Air Force Ones?
They are, how do I say this? Because I want to say this correctly. I want Nike coming after me. Uh, they are created in the same factory as Nike Air Force Ones. They are not custom and then hand painted. They are from the factory manufactured shoes. So the print quality is the print quality that you would get as a color, like on Air Force, like a pair of Air Force Ones. It is not a separate thing where we are painting acrylic paint over the shoes. Um, so that is they are the same quality, same shoe depth, same sole depth, everything. I just don't have my official Nike collab yet. And I'm gonna keep saying yet, right? Because I'm gonna believe that they're gonna want to pick this up as well. So I don't have my official Nike collab yet, but they are the same. Again, they come from the same factory.
Okay, so Nike, this is the perfect market. You have a show that's gonna come out that says Air Force Ones. Don't drop the ball on this. Like this is
Right.
sneakerheads would dig it, fans, anime fans, Gundam fans, like it's so apropos. Just please, I just make the right decision. I'm crossing my fingers, crossing my toes, because that would be fire. Again, thank you so much for being on this show. And see, you guys, you see how you glow from this conversation? See how you like enriched from it?